Hello, amazing listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Boo Business Podcast, the unscripted show where we unveil, demystify some of the confusing parts of birth, breastfeeding, and infant care during the first year of life while having a little fun. I'm your host, Naomi Catron, registered nurse and board-certified lactation consultant. Our mission here is simple: to foster collaboration in maternal child health and empower both families and businesses alike. We're all about creating a community where everyone feels supported and informed. In each episode, we dive deep into engaging discussions that span the entire spectrum of birth through the first year. From newborn feeding, because let's face it, it's something we all have got questions about, to tackling issues like tongue ties, the mysteries of pacifiers, mental health, body work, and just so much more. So whether you're a new parent navigating the incredible journey of early parenthood or a seasoned professional in the birth business, this podcast is your go-to source for laughter, knowledge, and some great insights. So we're here to make learning about boob business not just informative, but enjoyable. So join us for conversations that not only spark your curiosity, but also bring a smile to your face. So remember, every episode is a chance to connect, learn, and share. So hit the subscribe button and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Hello there, everyone. Today we have a special treat. We have Dr. Courtney Williams on the show, and she's going to be sharing with us some vital information that every listener needs to know. So without any further ado, I'm just going to have Dr. Williams introduce herself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks so much, Naomi, just for the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience. I'm really humbled to receive the invitation to come and be on the podcast. So I work in a population research center at a research-intensive university in the South. My work is primarily focused on improving the health and well-being of mothers and their children and families. As a medical sociologist, I'm trained to think about power and structural inequities, but I also engage in research that talks directly to people. And so I center the lives of marginalized voices and want to amplify groups and people that have historically been oppressed and marginalized.
I love that. I want to be very transparent with all of our listeners here that oftentimes I'm hoping to air this podcast episode in the month of August, which is we have different weeks in August, but it's all celebrating Breastfeeding Awareness Month, and we have a week for Indigenous breastfeeding and a week for Black breastfeeding, and the first week in September they've made it Hispanic Breastfeeding Week now, and so I am wanting to talk about some cultural maybe disparities, but oftentimes I understand, but some people might just turn this episode off and be like, that has nothing to do with me. That's not like my issue. And I'm encouraging everyone to listen to this whole episode, because this is not going to be a podcast about, oh my gosh, these are all the things that are wrong and these are all how you have made this system terrible. It's going to have some small takeaways for everyone to be able to feel empowered to make just tiny improvements so that we can all lock arms with each other as a community and help to do our little tiny steps to improving health outcomes, because you never know like who your baby is going to end up marrying. I know they're babies now, but you might end up with someone who, your sister-in-law or a cousin or your own kids. And then these issues I want you to be aware of, and I want you to know what part you can play a role in. So so I just want to put that out there so people do understand that this is for them. This episode is for everyone to kind of take little nuggets from. And we are really, really blessed to have Dr. Williams on the show today. She does some profound research and she's very specialized. So she is not giving us, TikTok and Instagram popular quotes and, clickbait. She's telling us well-researched information. So I guess since I want to start off with discussing some things that people can feel empowered with. Maybe, I know we probably should talk about the elephant in the room a little bit first. So tell us, from your perspective in your research, what are you finding some of the deficits are when it comes to racism and maternal health and reproductive health?
So I think a good practice as someone who is a mixed method scholar, qualitative researchers, we like to give a positionality statement. And so for those who can see me, I look like I have some melanin in my skin. And so just for listeners, I want to, do a positionality statement and recognize that I identify as a Black woman, a cisgendered heterosexual female. And so everything that I research, all of the empirical data that we'll be talking about today and my research, that is the position that I'm coming to all of my research with. I'm a Black feminist and reproductive justice advocate as well. And so I think the statistic that most of us are familiar with in the United States is the maternal mortality rate. And so if you think about the United States relative to other countries with advanced technology, the US is doing much worse. And so we have access to advanced technology, medical resources, the best of the best in terms of clinicians and practitioners and care. And yet, relative to other countries that have similar resources, the US mortality rate is abysmal. Then, when you think about breaking that down by race and ethnicity, typically the comparison group for most empirical research, due to a host of factors, is to compare white to other. And other could be Black, it could be Hispanic, it could be Asian American, Native American, etc. The largest disparity is going to be between the Black mothers and white mothers. Native Americans also have a large disparity between Native Americans and whites as well, but at least 2 times to 3 times higher death rates for Black women relative to their white counterparts. My research specifically tries to do a bit more of an intracategorical, or to think about Black women as not specifically a monolith. And so by that, I recognize that Black women are more likely to experience these adverse birth outcomes as well as their children, and thinking about more likely to experience severe maternal morbidity or life-threatening. Basically, severe maternal morbidity is thinking you almost died when you go to the hospital, but due to some intervention, you didn't. So I study severe maternal morbidity. I think about preterm birth, low birth weight, C-section rates, etc. And so essentially, we know that Black women have higher rates relative to their white counterparts in these specific outcomes or population health indicators. But among Black women, what's going on essentially within the group that is at the bottom of the totem pole? And so a lot of my work tries to bring a bit more of a heterogeneous perspective to that. And so what I find is that to some extent, education is protective, meaning having a bachelor's degree can essentially protect you from some of the negative health consequences associated with giving birth. But it's not a panacea, where just because you have a bachelor's or higher degree, does that automatically protect you from adverse experiences. Also, being married can also help your health, particularly for Black women. And then socioeconomic status more broadly can also benefit you in terms of, for Black women specifically, from these adverse health outcomes. But again, it's not a blanket slate. So just achieving higher SES doesn't always mean that Black women are going to have better outcomes, but it can be advantageous.
Okay, so that's really interesting because most of us might have heard the statistics that Black women are 2.5 times greater risk for maternal mortality or morbidity in childbirth or shortly thereafter. But those numbers aren't teased apart. And so what some of the clickbait or the headlines might be are things like, well, even Serena Williams had a poor outcome, and they name more affluent people with money and education and say, if this happens to her, it can happen to anyone. This is clearly just race-based, not socioeconomic. And if I hear you correctly, it sounds like you can have less chances of dying in birth if you have a bachelor's degree and if you're married. However, if you are Black and you're married, and have a bachelor's degree, you're still significantly more at risk for dying than your white counterpart with the same education and marital status. Is that correct?
In essence, absolutely. So there's research that I've done where you think about the Black versus white disparity in severe maternal morbidity. And having increased education, so as you move from less than a high school degree to a bachelor's degree, that significantly improves I'll phrase it a different way, decreases the chances that you will have severe maternal morbidity for white women. For Black women, we don't see that same downward
Mm-hmm.
trajectory. It's
Okay.
actually more fluid. And
Okay.
so where the two converge is at a bachelor's degree. And so bachelor's degree for white women and Black women, the likelihoods converge. But then you see for Black women who have advanced degree, so women like myself who hold a master's or PhD or MD, they actually have the same likelihood of having severe maternal morbidity or experiencing this outcome as Black women who have a high school degree.
Right.
And so again, can it help you to some extent? It's not this overall protective blanket that having higher socioeconomic status automatically protects you. And I think that sort of gets us into the weeds of thinking about, well, what other factors are present, such as implicit bias, racialized and gendered stereotypes, obstetric racism, and all of these structural issues where even if women like Serena Williams, who have all of the money in the world, she, in my opinion, is the greatest of all time in terms of tennis players. She has so much access and prestige, yet she's experiencing these same outcomes. It leads researchers like myself and others to wonder what in the heck is going on.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a different kind of more generalized question. And this is not scripted, so we're just going to see where this goes, right? If, people know on this podcast, I'm not Black. I'm Puerto Rican. And so we come in all different colors. And it's interesting when you collect that data. I often struggle when I was doing my nursing license. Every year I have to like recertify. And even when I go to the doctor's office, the questions it asks you about your race, it'll be like white, Black, non-Hispanic, Asian, and they have Indian in there, and then Pacific Islander. And I'll be like, which one do I press? Because I'm not Black, and I'm not white, and I'm not Asian. And then when I went to the doctor one time, they had me marked as white, and I remember trying to fix it. And then I went back. I was like, well, what box do I check? Because I'm not Black either. And then now I've learned that they've added an ethnicity box. So maybe the data will show different numbers because a lot of people in the Hispanic population, you can look white, you can look brownish like me, and you can look Black. And how you identify is different. So that's not really my question. My question, though, is why should people care? Like, why, if I was a white woman listening to this podcast, or an Asian woman, or a woman that's not affected by these numbers, right? Like, oh, my birth outcomes are fine. Why should we, as a community of women of different backgrounds, why should we care when we're not affected necessarily? Or maybe that's what we think. And then maybe maybe one or two things that a white or Asian woman can do to maybe help their fellow sister in this community.
And I love that language that you just used at the end, Naomi, because that's kind of what I want to lean into is sisterhood, right? So the big picture is people are dying, and that should be enough to move the needle in a way that's promoting equity and inclusion and making sure that our sisters, recognizing that not all people who can give birth might identify as a sister, but let's just say that they do, they're dying. And white women have the racial privilege to do something about that. They have essentially the social capital to be on the front lines advocating and to make their voices heard, whether it's separate from or alongside their Black, brown brothers and sisters. For the clinicians or practitioners or doulas, lactation consultants, educating yourself in the history of obstetrics and gynecology, in empirically based evidence and research, making sure that you understand when you are treating or speaking to, engaging with a Black woman, a brown woman, that these are the messages and narratives that are likely in their head, that you should hopefully want to partner with them to create a culturally competent, culturally sound care plan to treat them. So in that regard, if you are more of a doula or practitioner, you have a bit of power to create a safe and warm environment. And then you think about pregnant people who might identify as non-Black. You can partner with your Black sister or friend who's pregnant, share resources. You can throw her a baby shower. I mean, little things like that, because we're living in a world that is inundated with so much stress. Black women historically have noted additional stressors relating to that confluence of sexism and racism. And so just taking a little bit of burden off of them to host a baby shower, ask them if they need anything, share resources, going with them to their appointments. Not saying that white women need to be the saviors for Black women. Black women 10 toes down can stand up and speak for ourselves. We can speak for ourselves. But if, you have the rapport with a Black woman and you're white to go with them and help them advocate for themselves, or just stand there in solidarity and support, by all means do that. But I think above and beyond that, educating yourself so that you remain knowledgeable of what your sisters are facing in terms of when they become pregnant, give birth, and try to, parent to the best of their ability.
I love that. There's a lot of good things that you said in there. First, I'm going to put a shameless plug. I'm going to tell you that one of the main reasons I wrote my book that I wrote, is because people don't have access to those golden nuggets that you get with specialized, individual, high quality lactation care. And I'm going to talk about breastfeeding in a minute, and breastfeeding in Black women. But you also talked about in the beginning how Black women are having higher rates of preterm labor and other complications, preeclampsia, all sorts of things. And so my book, like the whole second half of it, is just about how to protect breastfeeding, what you need to know to feel empowered if you encounter some of these complications, because otherwise you're walking in and you're not knowing. No one goes into birth like, oh, I'm planning for a C-section, or I'm planning to have a preeclamptic, episode, and I'm planning on having my baby in the NICU unit. No, that's not what you're planning for. But how can we still protect your feeding goals, your infant feeding goals, if those things happen? Well, I want you to read this book, and I want you to be prepared so you have all the little tools and cheat sheets you need, so that you know how to, or your partner can advocate for you, or your mommy or your auntie or whoever is there at the bedside with you. And yeah, if you have a friend, no matter what color she is, if she can come in and have your back during that postpartum period or during that birth experience and help advocate for you as a friend, like, that's the village part of it. That's the sisterhood part of it. And I think I can tell you that, I've heard people say, hey, I'm white, my patient's Black. I just feel like she doesn't accept me, or she doesn't, like, I may not be able to get through to her because I'm not, like, I don't look like her. And I think that is an obstacle that we overcome, or an obstacle to be overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the same way we could vibe with Asian family, Indian family, family from the Middle East. Like, they want people in general want to know that you care first, not how much you know. What's that saying? It's like, not how much you know, it's how much you care, or something like that. They want you to lean into their cultural experience. And like you said, educate yourself. So that was one thing I wanted to say, but you said something about educating yourself, and that I think it might be important to share some of those little things that you wish maybe a non-Black person knew about some of those things that Black women are being told, or like the things that they're carrying, because we're not starting on even ground. A lot of Black women, and different people from different socioeconomic backgrounds are starting in a much slower pace, and they're really just trying to do their best with all these. It's almost like my husband's like, we're always bobbing and weaving. There's always something that you're combating against, never mind just the act of being pregnant. So maybe if you can share some of the things that I think would be helpful, you might wish a white-facing provider or friend or doula should know before they kind of come into this situation.
Absolutely. I think first and foremost is to recognize your own privilege. And that takes work. If this is your first day on the anti-racism journey,
Mm-hmm.
I would say maybe take a step back to do some self-reflection, sit along some of your white peers who might be a bit more advanced, further along in this journey to figure out how to, communicate and word things. But for those who recognize and have a general sense of awareness of the privilege racially that you carry, I think the first thing that you can do is be aware of the stereotypes and the narratives that are in Black women's heads. And so I had this amazing opportunity when I was a PhD student to speak with almost 40 people, pregnant people who gave birth or were pregnant during COVID. And a lot of the things that the Black women were sharing with me is they know about the rates of death for Black women being higher than white women. And they were terrified. I mean, time and time and time again, they were saying, I just don't want to die. I don't want my baby to die. And we're sitting there crying together and just I'm holding space, for them to process through these really traumatic experiences. And I think that's the first thing that I would share with our white sisters is Black women to some extent can be petrified going into birth because they literally do not know if they are going to survive because of all of the systemic issues that are inundated in our medical industrial complex. The second thing is the historical legacy of pain thresholds. And so medical journals during the antebellum period were inundated with information that Black people were impervious to pain, meaning that they could sustain these higher pain tolerances. And so when a Black woman who is giving labor is screaming out in pain and she's not being listened to and then she's not receiving the proper medication, those are the things where she may benefit from, not always, but she may benefit from an advocate saying, Doctor so-and-so, midwife so-and-so, doula so-and-so, my friend here is in pain. Listen to her. Just because she's Black does not mean that she can withstand more pain and have a higher pain threshold. And so listening to what she needs in those instances and then supporting her to the best of your ability. And I'll also just speak to those who are coupled with a man. You're not exempt from this conversation too. White men can, again, if you have a Black wife, if you have a Black child, a Black partner, you can advocate for them in the same way, just as we're sharing about our white sisters to make sure that their needs are heard and listened to.
Excellent. I think, you said, and I can echo exactly what you said. Black women know that they are at higher risk for all of these complications. Like, they just know that. And so think about yourself. Just think about it. When I am afraid, how do I act? Do I act warm? Do I act inviting? Do I act, like I'm trying to be your friend? No, when I'm afraid, I get all sorts of things. I get angry. I get very protective. I get defensive, right. And so it's not like you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, especially if you thought that you're really at risk for dying and your baby could be at risk for dying. You're going to be ultra on edge. So I think that's important, especially for nurses. I will tell you, as practicing nurse, I have worked with older nurses who have told me, yes, when I was a young nurse, I was taught that Black women have a higher threshold for pain and that they don't need pain medication at the same rate as white women. They also, have you heard that they call white babies in the NICU unit? There's a term for them. They're called wimpy white boys. I don't know if you heard that. Okay. Well, this is the inverse of your research, they're basically saying, babies who are born preterm or have to go to the NIC unit need all of the resources, need the whole team, need everyone to show up to birth. Because so if I know that I'm the labor nurse and you're having a preterm white male infant, everyone should come to that delivery. All the drugs, all the resuscitation, everyone needs to be there to resuscitate this baby because it is going to be, quote unquote, a wimpy white boy. Now, let it be a little black girl that's being born. It'll be fine. She'll be fine because she's a strong black girl. That's not really, you shouldn't have different methods of intervention based on race. Do you see how that just sounds like that's just not right when it comes out of your mouth? But that's real life. Okay. Now I haven't delivered a baby in 2 years, but I mean, that's not that long. I've delivered babies for a while before that. And so when someone asks, what is systemic racism? I don't think people realize that happens. I think people don't realize. And so you mentioned in the beginning, you said, if you're a non-Black person just starting on this anti-racism journey, maybe learn from maybe more experienced people, but also check your privilege. I don't think people know what that is. What is, so maybe can you share a little bit, like, what does white privilege look like? Like maybe, I think maybe we don't realize, like when you're white facing, you can go into a Target or any kind of a store and people greet you and smile at you when you go on your merry way shopping. But the darker you are and the more you fit a more certain profile, and you definitely would be Black, you're not going to get that same warm greeting every single time. And so that's one example I can think of. But maybe, do you think you can shed some light on what white privilege looks like, or maybe some resources or books that people can look into, or podcasts or anything that they can learn more about that?
I can share from a researcher perspective. I
Sure.
don't want to speak for white women because, again, I identify as a Black woman. But from a researcher perspective, there are various scholars, the Invisible Knapsack, and the scholar Peggy McIntosh. She essentially identifies about 20 to 25 different items where white people don't have to think about these things because they're essentially invisible. Like you said, going into a Target and you don't have to worry about whether or not you are being followed. You can go into an appointment with your doula or your OB-GYN, and you don't have to think about, are they thinking about me in a certain type of way because I look a certain type of way, because I'm, as Black women do. I spoke with, again, in the interviews that I did during COVID, I spoke with about 25 white women. And this was a theme that I found was, to some extent, white women were completely oblivious of their privilege. And this is me asking them a very direct question. To what extent did your race impact you during your pregnancy experience? And for a host of them, well, race didn't impact me. Actually, it did. You just didn't recognize it because to you, whiteness is typically coupled with being invisible. We don't think about white or whiteness as a racialized category, where all of it's socially constructed, but it's the Black and brown community that has to deal with the stereotypes. You think about aspects even of vicarious racism. And so one of my dear friends and colleagues, Mia Brantley, her work speaks to Black mothers who have Black children, whether they're mixed or not, and the stressors that they have to endure when their Black child goes outside, just walking out on the street. We think about Trayvon Martin and all of these children who now are being birthed into an environment, if you're racialized as Black, that is necessarily not safe for them. And so this is an additional stressor on the mother that then can impact their health. That white parents, if you're a white parent of a child who is also, who's not mixed, essentially, who's white, you don't have to deal with that. You don't have to, again, think about, am I going to get access to pain medication? Am I going to be believed when I walk into the hospital and ask for whatever you might come in with in terms of your chief complaint? And so these are the things that white privilege, whiteness makes invisible to our larger social environment. And it's just the way that race and racism continues to permeate every facet of the
Yeah.
US.
I'm going to put the link in there for Peggy McIntosh's Invisible Knapsack paper so that people can learn a little bit more about it. I've read a lot of really cool books. Unfortunately, I don't have all the titles right here off the top of my tip of my tongue because I have a weird, precarious point of view that I'm coming from where I grew up being very, very diverse to what my appearance is very like I'm the kind of person that you want on your like Wick video because I could be anything.
Mm,
Like I'm like that brown enough person. And so my kids also are often can your son be on the school billboard or this or that? Because they're just the right enough looking
mm,
ethnicity to not be offensive to anyone that might have bias. So they're not too dark and they're not too light. Does that make sense? And I
mm-hmm,
see that and I'm like, oh man, that's so interesting.
mm-hmm,
I had a different experience when I grew up on the East Coast. English was not my first language, but I also am I'm not black. I don't have a dark
right.
appearance, so that came with some privilege too. And now I don't have an accent anymore because I learned English really young. And so there is a lot of privilege I can even in that transition I can see. So I wanted to learn more about this, especially as being a bedside nurse. I feel like we don't, especially in Austin, we don't have a very large black population. So I really wanted to make sure I can be there and be present and like break down some of the barriers. Because I feel like when you're scared you're going to die, you're not going to just come on in and be like, yeah, do whatever you like to me. Let's just roll with it. No, it's not like that. You got to really overcome some trust issues and those are warranted. Like I'm not going to knock your hustle. Like that's real. Like that's really warranted. And it's my job to build our trust together and keep this party moving forward and keep you safe. That's not something that you're just going to give over freely. And I respect that. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna link that article or that paper, The Invisible Knapsack, by Peggy McIntosh in the notes. I did want to shift a little bit to because this is hopefully going to be aired in August when it's we have Black Breastfeeding Week. Tell me, I remember probably like 6 years ago, I wrote an article. It's on my blog, and it has to do with the enormity of, racial inequity and Black mothers and breastfeeding. And I have a very well-intentioned white friend who I would not consider to be a racist, but I would consider her to be completely blind of her white privilege. And she said to me, why is Black Breastfeeding Week even needed? What's the difference between Black breastfeeding and white breastfeeding? How would you respond to that?
What a loaded question. Does she have a does she
Sorry,
have a
girl.
no, but does she have a whole, 2 days to let's unpack the history of Black breastfeeding in the United States? I think, my response to her is going to be similar to when people say about the Black Lives Matter movement. Well, don't all lives matter? Here's the thing. If we recognize that Black women, Black birthing people are the most disenfranchised when it comes to various health outcomes, breastfeeding in general, and we funnel resources to protect and help this disenfranchised group, it will literally help everybody else.
Hmm.
So it's not pie that is just evaporating. This is everyone can have a slice. And by helping your Black brothers and sisters, by acknowledging that their rates are lower in terms of breastfeeding, then you are acknowledging White Breastfeeding Week. But for today, for this week in August, we're going to amplify the voices that are historically marginalized, that don't get the same platform, that don't get the same access to resources. And so to the white sister that you talked with, I would hope that you would want to come alongside me to support me in these endeavors. And through it, we can learn, together. So that's what I would say to her
Hmm.
without giving her a whole dissertation long,
Hmm.
seminar in the history and legacy.
I'm reading right now this Whoopi Goldberg book. I don't remember what it's called, but she has her new book out, and I think I'm only on chapter 5. But because she grew up in New York like I did, and she grew up in the projects, she says she doesn't know she was poor. She didn't really know too much about racism because she grew up with so many cultures and everyone was poor just like her. And they all were in the struggle together. It wasn't until later on that she was maneuvering a predominantly white world. And,
Mm-hmm.
I love, and I cannot quote it right now, I'll paraphrase it, but what she basically said is why people do not know any other world except for their world. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
their privilege. And so she had a very, believe it or not, I don't view her as a gentle person, but in this particular part of the book, she had a gentle approach to like they don't know what they just said was so off mark
Mm-hmm.
and missing so much because they've never experienced this other world. So instead of us being quick to dismiss and dissociate, because that's not doing anything other than building a bigger divide and rift, I felt like she was really trying to say, let me lend this olive branch to you. I'm not going to teach you everything because that's not my job
Mm-hmm.
to teach you, but I am going to help guide you to where you can find some tools and so that you can know that you're missing part of the
Right.
puzzle. And if you want to take up that challenge and educate yourself and learn and do the work, then great. But I'm not going to just not give you the opportunity and not let you know and then just cut myself off from you. And I felt like that approach was really mature, emotionally mature, because she's had a lot of hurt and things in her life, and that's what I'm hoping this conversation can be, is more just like you don't know what you don't know in every facet of life. Um, there's a lot that I'm missing. I don't know a lot of things, and I probably say lots of ignorant, hurtful things, not even knowing. But I would hope someone would love me enough to say, hey, these are a couple resources. This is a little bit about why this is a hot and charged subject. And more specifically, when it comes to breastfeeding, what I don't know that many people, white people, know is that Black women were forced to stop feeding their own babies with their body and give their milk to their white slave owners' kids. Many times, then the Black slaves' children themselves would be malnourished. And so, whenever you're forced to do something, you're not going to want to do it. And so, that's a big thing we're overcoming, years and years and hundreds of years of being forced to be someone else's wet nurse. Now we're having to retrain, like, it's okay, you can use your body for your own baby. It's not a forced thing. Opposing breastfeeding is only hurting yourself and hurting your
Right.
family's legacy. You're not hurting the man anymore. And I think people don't know that. They don't know that that's part of our history.
So I think you mentioned the Whoopi Goldberg and her coming alongside essentially. And I think that's great if a Black woman wants to do that. But just like to your point, Naomi, not all Black women want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they
It's
shouldn't be
tiring.
expected to. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
like we already deal with enough, and
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't be expected to come alongside you and teach you and walk you through, which again is why white people can teach each other. And so having people who may be further along on their anti-racism journey partner with those who are just dabbling into the water, for lack of a better phrasing, come together and do the work within their own communities before you go out and try to do more culturally collaborative work. As you were talking, I'm reminded of like 5 different books from the question that you mentioned earlier. So I'll lift
Okay.
those up.
Okay.
So the first one would be Bonilla Silva's Colorblind Racist. And so his work is pivotal to sociologists. And I cite his work a lot. And so Bonilla Silva has like 7 different editions. It's a great book. It's a bit more dense in terms of it's an academic book, but I think
Okay.
it could be a great sort of resource for those who are ready for the challenge. I'll also lift up Robin DiAngelo's book. The name is escaping me right now, but her book I
Let's
think is
see.
really accessible to white folks. And then also Good White Racist is really accessible to white folks. And then if you want a bit more of the history, as you were mentioning, the wet nurses, this is to me any person who's doing anything in obstetrics and gynecology, this is like, you have to read this book. I don't care if you're black, white, whatever. Killing the Black Body by Dorothy Roberts
Yes.
it's a non-starter. Like, you have to just dive in, embrace the trauma, wrestle with it. And yeah, for me, I read that book during grad school and it changed my whole perspective and world. And so,
those are good resources. Yeah.
That you can.
Yeah, that's good. I think, I mean, the thing is, a lot of times people say, oh, educate yourself. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like people need real life, like tangible things. Like, okay, today I'm going to, whatever, learn about white privilege. And then, first quarter, I'm going to read this book, Killing the Black Body. Or like, I feel like some tangible things that people can go home and do so they can feel, at least make that first effort so they feel part of the solution, as opposed to just proliferating. Sometimes you feel helpless. You're like, I'm not trying to be part of the problem, but I don't even know where to start to get it moving in the right direction. But if everyone takes these little baby steps, I think it can be really, really helpful for not just yourself, but then you're teaching your kids and your future generations. And that's what it's all about, is paying it forward, I think we could talk about this all day, but for respecting your time, is there anything, any last thoughts that you want to leave us with in regards to this topic?
Again, I'm just super delighted to be here to contribute to the platform that you have, the work that you're doing, Naomi. You're talking about what can people do? Listen to you and read your book and listen to your podcast. You're making the conversation accessible to an audience that academics like myself may never be able to reach. And it's in a way that is again digestible. And it's like, this is just the first step. And so I think for anyone who's listening or is curious, being an anti-racist, being an advocate for reproductive justice, birth justice, it's a journey. It's not you do one thing today and then you're done and you give yourself a pat on the back. This is a commitment. And given our sociopolitical climate, I think that the next 3 to 4 years are going to really sift through who's down for the cause and who was just putting up some black squares in 2020. And so I think for those of us who really want to change the narrative, to push the needle forward, it's going to take some grit. And this is across the racial spectrum. It's going to take some grit in this moment. And so again, I'm just grateful for friends and colleagues like you who are doing the work, who refuse to let the system weigh them down, but to continue to take breaks, but also move forward with efficiency and purpose.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you said take breaks, but you can't take a break from being black. I'm just saying.
You can't. You can put on your do not disturb and have your self-care day. You can, and just, do what you need to do inside your house. But yes, as soon as you go outside in those streets, you are blackety black. And so in that regard, there is no break. It's like, I'm showing up as I am. You can take it or leave it.
Right.
But yeah, we have to stay informed and continue to, you can't let your foot off the gas.
Right. I do love how the younger generation, because I did get to know you from a younger generation person. I feel like they're wanting to know and learn more and have more openness. And so I do love that. And I think it's going to be really promising. So thank you so much for just spending time with me. Your time is very valuable. And you're doing God's work by doing this research. I know it's hard to get funding these days. But this is vital for the fabric of our country.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
A pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening. To learn more about newborn feeding and get your free swipe file, visit milkdiva.com/newborn feeding. And if you've ever said, wow, I wish I would have known that while you're listening to this podcast, then help a friend out and share this podcast with them. You can also help us by leaving us a rating so more people can benefit from finding this podcast. Medical disclaimer. Please know that all opinions expressed on this podcast are solely my own and not intended to substitute the advice of a medical provider. I am not a medical doctor, and all information shared is intended for your general knowledge and is geared towards full-term, healthy singleton infants and healthy, low-risk pregnant or postpartum women.